The extermination of the native population, however, did not stop with the Greek genocide. It was followed by the destruction of Greek historical and cultural heritage, including the Greek toponyms. Most of the place names that changed, as I mentioned earlier, were in the Black Sea districts, in the eastern and southeastern districts, where you have predominantly Armenian and Kurdish population. However, despite all these state policies for erasing the traces of the Greek presence in Pontos and in Anatolia in general, culture cannot get easily erased. The past is still present and it speaks out loud. The developments regarding the Kurdish liberation movement, combined with the geopolitical changes currently taking place in the Middle East, create pressures on Turkey for further democratization and tuning with the Western values and ideals, hopefully. Thousands of people in Turkey nowadays still, despite prohibitions, they still speak Pontian Greek. This is one of their representatives, Mr. Mustafa, who is a very good lira performer and singer. Another very famous lira performer in the region. And there are, of course, younger generations of musicians, like the young guy we're seeing here in the picture, Adem, who is from the area of Surmen, Pontian Greek speaker himself. Also scholars, activists, and intellectuals who are forming a new movement for the revival of the indigenous cultures of Pontos, either Greek, Armenian, Laz, or Georgian. This is a positive sign that should not be overlooked, but rather it should be analyzed carefully. Dear friends, our struggle for memory and for the recognition of the genocide is not simply an emotional or ethical matter. It is also our own contribution to peacemaking, to reconciliation, and to democratization. A new democratic state in Anatolia that respects international law and its neighbors is a state that grants all the liberties to its citizens and allows their cultures to flourish. A state that recognizes past atrocities and crimes. This requires a completely new democratic regime, to the creation of which we can also contribute through collaborating with all those who wish to make the great change in Anatolia, and through demanding with them the recognition of the genocides, in plural. This recognition is not simply an issue related to the past, but more importantly, it is an issue that can contribute significantly in the shaping of the future in the Eastern Mediterranean. We have the duty not to betray the memory of our ancestors, those who gave us the gift of life, but also, by protecting their memory and by demanding recognition, we create a more stable environment for us and for the future generations, so that our children, and even if it might sound utopian, the children of the world, will never run the danger of becoming like the children of this picture. Thank you very much.
Before we present our next speaker, we will have a little performance by Mr. Alexis Batkaridis with the dance group from Pontian Society Pontos of Norwalk, accompanying him as a chorus.
Αηλί εμάς και βάι εμάς οι Τούρκοι βολεπέραν.
Αηλί εμάς να βάι εμάς οι Τούρκοι βολεπέραν.
Επέραν τον βασίλωσκα και λαένα φεντία.
Επέραν το βασίλωσκα, ελάιεν αφεντία.
Μυρολογούντα εκκλησιάς, κλαίγνε τα μοναστήρια.
Μυρολογούντα εκκλησιάς, κλαίνε τα μοναστήρια.
Κι Αγιάννες ο Χρυσόστομος λέει και
memoir in the healing process. Ms. Halo attended the Cooper Union School of Art and Architecture and the State University of New York, where she was awarded a fellowship. In 2009, Thea Halo and Sano Halo, who will be 104 in May 2013, were given honorary Greek citizenship by the Greek government. In 2012, the Association of Greek American Professional Women, AGAPO, honored Thea Halo and Sano Halo for their profound contribution to literature and to Hellenic cultural heritage and history. Thea Halo held the Dukakis Chair in March through April 2002 at Anatolia College, the 2002 AHEPA Homer Award, the 2002 New York State Governor's Award was also given to Sano Halo on the subject of Not Even My Name, in honor of Women's History Month, recognizing women of courage and vision. Many other honors were bestowed on Ms. Halo by numerous other Greek and Greek American organizations. Ms. Halo is the author of the critically acclaimed memoir, Not Even My Name, which I'm sure we're all aware of. Not Even My Name was instrumental in garnering the first state resolutions that recognized the genocide of the Pontian and other Asia Minor Greeks and Assyrians. Ms. Halo has recently published her collections of poetry, A Lid for Every Pot. She is currently working on a history book about the Ottoman Empire and the Greek, Assyrian, and Armenian genocides. Ms. Halo is a member of the International Association of Genocide Scholars and the International Network of Genocide Scholars. Ms. Halo has also given scholarly papers and lectures at Yale University, Queensborough Community College, Fordham University, Erie Community College, Macquarie University in Sydney, University of Melbourne, Military Museum in Athens, Greece, Council Hall, Thessaloniki, Anatolia College, Thessaloniki, and other universities, libraries, community centers, and churches. She is a member of both the International Association of Genocide Scholars and the International Network of Genocide Scholars. Ms. Halo was a co-sponsor of the historic IAGS resolution of 2007 that recognized the genocide of the Pontian and other Asia Minor Greeks and Assyrians between 1914 and 1923 in the Ottoman Empire as comparable to the Armenian genocide. Thea Halo's first career was as a painter and an art director. In 1990, Ms. Halo worked as an announcer and producer of her own programs for public radio. In 1997, Ms. Halo worked as a news correspondent for public radio station WBAI in New York City. Please welcome Ms. Thea Halo.
I want to thank Pan-Pontian Association and everybody that was instrumental in bringing this event together, and of course the consuls of Greece and Cyprus. I'm very happy to be here among you. My paper is called The Role of Memoir in the Healing Process. For most of my life, my heritage was a mystery to me. Both my parents came from Turkey, but they were not Turks. My mother sometimes said the Turks called us Rum. I had no idea what that meant. It would be many years later that someone told me I must be a Pontic Greek if my mother came from the Black Sea region of Turkey. Until recently, he was the only person I had ever met who had ever heard of the Pontic Greeks. When I once told a teacher my father was Assyrian, I was informed with great authority that the Assyrians were an ancient people that didn't exist anymore. I thought, how can I be something that didn't exist? Since my book was published, other Assyrians tell me they had the same experience. With no photos or mementos from my mother's family, they remained in the realm of fairy tale. And with only one uncle on my father's side, and one Armenian aunt, probably with her own sad story to tell, we lived in a kind of vacuum on the west side of Manhattan among the Irish. My siblings and I remedied the problem by inventing a heritage. Most of us became Egyptians, not modern Egyptians. In those days, we didn't know who they were. No, we became ancient Egyptians, kin to Nefertiti. Looking back, I realized how important heritage must be to an adolescent, so important that we felt compelled to invent one. I wouldn't meet another Assyrian until my book was published in 2000, and my mother and I wouldn't become part of the Greek community until then also. By then, my mother had long forgotten her Greek Pontian language, since she had not spoken to anyone in Greek since she lost her family at the age of 10. This displacement and loss of continuity between the generations and historic homeland is another aspect of the crime of genocide. For my mother and too many others, the Ottoman genocide of the Pontian and other Asia Minor Greeks, Assyrians, and Armenians between 1913 to 23 was complete. By the age of 10, my mother had lost family, community, home, and country, and finally even her language and her name. More profound in a larger sense, however, was the fact that even the name of the Pontic Greeks was forgotten as if erased from history, while the Assyrians were relegated to the distant past. Until recently, the massacres and displacements that took place during the final years of the Ottoman Empire were known exclusively as the Armenian Genocide. The Ottoman Greeks and Assyrians were either entirely left out of scholarly studies, or they were relegated to the also mentioned category of Ottoman citizens who suffered. One account of the period by past IAGS President Robert Nelson, writing on the Armenian genocide, went so far as to deny the very existence of the Greeks and Assyrians in Anatolia when he wrote that the Greeks and then the Balkan Christians had seceded, leaving the Armenians as the last of the great Christian minorities still under Ottoman rule. Where others had simply ignored the facts surrounding the genocide of the Greeks and Assyrians, Professor Nelson's false assertions were tantamount to a virtual final solution, wiping away almost 4 millennia of history of Greeks and Assyrians in Asia Minor. As children, we knew my mother had lost her family when they were driven from their home, but she was afraid to burden us with all the details. When I was a child, I promised to take her back to Turkey one day to find her home. In 1989, when she was 79 years old, I kept that promise. I thought I was taking her on her journey, but when I stood on the land she once called home, I realized the journey was also mine. It was the first time in my life that I felt connected to my heritage. Her people finally became my people. One of the reasons I'm most proud of my mother is that through all her sorrow, she never taught us to hate the Turks. She placed the blame where blame belonged, on the Ottoman and Turkish government. Mustafa Kemal Pasha, as she called him, Ataturk. In her time of death marches, he was the one. Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote, "Every historical period produces its share of otherwise inconspicuous individuals who have the gift of preserving the past. The use we make of these insights is entirely up to us." My mother is just such an inconspicuous individual. She told me that she used to make a point of remembering everything by reciting it to herself over and over so as not to forget her family and life. She also used to say, if I could only write, I would tell the world what happened to us. Although I was a painter, not a writer, when we returned from Turkey, I wanted to tell the world for her. I decided early on that I would include everything my mother remembered about her early childhood, the death march to exile, her 2 years as a virtual slave when she was orphaned at age 10, her rescue by an Armenian family, her arranged marriage at the age of 15 to my father, who was 3 times her age, and their life in America. I decided that if she had remembered something for 80 years, it must be important in the whole scheme of things. What we created is a portrait of how Pontic Greeks lived in the Pontic Mountains, how Assyrians lived in the south of Turkey in small hamlets, and how Armenians lived in Diyarbakir, and of course, the long death march to exile that left so many corpses on the road. I want to read just little segments of chapter 20 from my book. This chapter is called Holding Death in My Arms. One morning after the rain had pelted our tent throughout the night, we woke to a clear sky and a loud cry of anguish that rivaled the brilliance of the morning. Not far from where we stood, a boy lay on the ground. He lay on his side with his legs drawn up and his body curled as if in sleep. His father bent over him sobbing, his huge graying mustache dripping tears. I recognized him at once. His voice shot through my memory. "You will marry my son one day. You mark my words, you will marry my son one day." Through his sobbing, the dead boy's father tried to shake his son awake. Then he lifted his son's stiff and frozen body off the ground to cradle the boy's head in his arms. The boy's parents dug a shallow grave on the side of the road, with only their hands to use as tools. The father tried to straighten his son's legs to lay them to rest, but they were already frozen in place. We left him lying there in a shallow grave covered with a few grains of soil, as if he were still asleep. All along the road, one haunting image after another assaulted my eyes, and as we got further south, they were more and more numerous. A newborn baby dropped from her mother's womb lay in the dust, still covered with its skin of blood. Patches of soil clung to it to form a gruesome shell. Its mother lay beside it in a pool of her own blood. In Karabash, a town on the other side of Diyarbakir, they let us sleep in a church that night. Our family was given a small closet of a room to lay down our blanket on the floor. Father went out to sell his gold watch to buy us food. Nastasia had fallen ill. Her eyes were lusterless, and she slept most of the time, waking only to relieve her running bowels. I lay her across my body to keep her warm and off the ground. Yanni slept soundly. Mother held Mathia to her breast. Christodula was also sick. Benia, Christodula asked in a pitiful voice, "Please get me some water." "No," I said, "I don't want to." I would have had to go to the town to look around for water. It wasn't a simple thing of going to a sink and turning on a faucet. I was so tired. In my 10 short years of life, I had walked enough for a lifetime. But to this day, I wish I could take back my answer. I would gladly walk 100 miles to bring her water now. Nastasia, she was 4 years old, her little sister, was up and down all evening. She'd open her eyes and asked me to take her to relieve herself. Her bowels had been running for many days. I will never forget the last time I took her out, then came back again to lay her across my chest and cradle her sweet curly head on my arm. Her head fell back and her eyes began to roll, and from her throat came such an eerie, gurgling sound.